Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting. As usual, this is being broadcast live via the County Council's website and will be archived so you can view it afterwards. This is our first meeting in person for more than a year. However, due to continued restrictions, we are limited with the number of people we can have in the room, and therefore officers who are presenting reports will be joining the meeting virtually. I can ask you to remember to switch your microphones on and off manually when you're speaking. So apologies for absence. We have none that need declaring. Minutes, which is agenda item 1 on pages 5 to 16. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of March 2021 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Deborah?
Happy to second.
Show of hands, all in favour? Thank you. Urgent items, there are none. Declarations of interest, anyone who has an interest in respect of items on the agenda. I need to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest in item 20 on the agenda, Ashby Canal restoration extension to option agreement, blah, 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 as I own a property near the development and will leave the meeting when this item is considered. So to save me coming in and coming out, I will move the canal to the very last item from wherever it is. And then when I go out, I won't need to come back in and Deborah will take the chair. We have a declaration from Pam Posnett. She wants to declare an item in agenda item 6, the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road Southern Section HIF grant, and will leave the meeting whilst this item is considered. Is that correct, Pam?
Yes, that's correct, Leader.
Yes, Richard Shepherd.
Thank you, Chairman. Personal interest in item 12 as a member of the local pension board, but I can still, I believe, speak and vote on that. And a personal interest in item 15 as a member of Charnwood Borough Council. Thank you, Chairman.
Very good, thank you. So agenda item 4 is the 2021 Provisional Revenue and Capital Outturn. This is on pages 17 to 62. Oh, I'm sorry, Ozzy. Sorry, I'm going back. Ozzy. Ozzy's declared an interest in the only person as a member of the pension board. Microphone off, Ozzy. Very good. Oh, Deborah. Sorry, it's hard to see in here.
I also need to declare an interest in item 15 as a member of Charnwood Borough Council.
Okay, that is everybody this time. So as I said, 2021 Provisional Revenue and Capital Outturn, pages 17 to 62. And we've got Chris Tambini, Director of Corporate Resources, who will present the report. Then after Chris has spoken, I'll call Lee Brecken, who has responsibility for this area. So Chris.
Thank you, Leader. Last year was probably the most challenging year ever for local government, and it certainly was the toughest year financially. And it's no surprise that the outturn is very different, and I mean very different to the budget for all services. I'm not going to explain the variances, they're all set out in the report, but we'll provide just a couple of examples to give a bit of context. We received an extra £100 million from government to cope with pressures associated with COVID, and also to provide extra services to Leicestershire residents, so things like kind of COVID support grants, track and trace, food parcels, etc. And as part of that support, we provided an extra nearly £30 million to social care providers. So some very kind of large swings in terms of the budget. The pressures that were there pre-pandemic, unfortunately do remain. So we've overspent the special education needs budget by 10 million. That means the deficit now is around the 18 million mark. This is a really major concern, and it's especially a big concern because there's no proposals yet from government about how we're going to cope with this, what is a very big national problem. There's also pressures in terms of adult social care and also children's social care. And children's social care, we overspent the budget last year. I'll end with a couple of positives. It is really pleasing that overall we did end up with an underspend of around £10 million. And this does reflect the good financial discipline that's been built up over a number of years. I think members will recall that we did introduce expenditure controls in the summer last year, and they proved very successful. The allocation of that underspend is set out in paragraph 76. And I think Mr. Reckon is going to say a little bit more around that allocation. Just a couple of words on capital. Although there has been significant slippage in the capital programme, I think again it's a real positive that we did deliver about £105 million worth of capital projects. A particularly good achievement, I think, when you think the construction was severely impacted by both COVID and also supply chain disruption. I'm going to end there. The recommendations are set out in the Green Order paper.
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
Yeah. The Director has outlined the position well. It has been a very tough year financially, but I think fair to say that the organisation responded very well and continued to manage the finances in a prudent and sensible way. There is also no doubt that we face an extremely challenging financial position in the coming years with spending pressures and also low funding, which is not a good mix at all. As Chris mentioned, we did have an underspend last year of 9.9 million, and we have used this to fund a few projects which really were outlined in the manifesto that we put forward. Highways priorities, we're allocating an additional £5 million for highways maintenance, community speed management, and member highways funding, which is the subject of a separate report. Funding for SEND, an additional 2.4 million for capital investment to help us try and address the issues that raises at the moment. We've also earmarked 2.2 million for continued transformation, and also monies towards Leicester Cathedral, which is matched as to what Leicester City Council are also contributing of 350,000. So that's what I'll say on the report. Happy to propose the recommendations that the provisional revenue and capital outturn be noted, prudential indicators as shown in Appendix E to the report be noted, and that the net underspend is used for additional commitments as specified in the report. Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you, Lee. Richard Shepherd?
I second that, Chairman.
No other speakers. Can I have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you very much. Agenda item 5, special educational needs and disabilities. Progress with the delivery of the high needs block. This is on pages 63 to 76. To advise his cabinet on the progress of delivery and the worsening position, which we already heard about with regard to the 2021 SEND capital programme. We've got Jane Moore, Director of Children and Families, to present the report. Then I'll be going to Deborah, who has responsibility for this matter. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. So the report you have in front of you is both advising on the progress of the plan, but also the worsening position, but also seeks a position around the planned consultation with schools around transfer between blocks. So just by way of background, the high needs funding within the dedicated schools grant provides funding for support packages for an individual or child with special educational needs in a range of settings. That's both within mainstream school, but also provision outside of mainstream if their needs can't be met. The High Needs Block Development Plan was approved by Cabinet in December 2018, and it sets out a range of actions that are being undertaken to move towards realigning expenditure with the grant received from the Department for Education. The plan does include proposals for expansion of local provision, looking at how we can be more inclusive in terms of keeping children in mainstream school, but also reducing the reliance on specialist provision, particularly in those higher cost independent provisions. You can see in paragraph 25, we've set out the main areas of the plan, including the work we've been doing on inclusion, joint commissioning, service delivery and sufficiency. In paragraph 26, we've set out the information for Leicestershire in comparison to other local authorities, including our higher rate of education, health and care plans, and also our higher reliance on independent provision. The plan is starting to show some positive impact. So we are seeing referrals for education, health and care plans reducing, which does mean that the right children are receiving plans. And our overall numbers of EHCPs, whilst they are increasing, they're increasing at a slower rate than our national and regional comparators. However, our education, health and care plan growth does still far exceed the population growth. So whilst the High Needs Development Plan of Work has been successful in delivering some of the service transformation and in increasing the number of specialist school places we've got in Leicestershire, some of the financial targets that we set out within the original plan have been exceptionally challenging. Some of that's related to demand. So the demand for specialist places has increased in excess of what we estimated, and it's forecast to rise by a further 3.5% over the forthcoming 4 years. And demand for places is the most significant driver of the cost and therefore the deficit within the budget. Within the plan, we also set out a whole range of savings, and it included significant levels of savings to be achieved through the movement of pupils from some of those higher cost provisions into newer provisions. Unfortunately, this hasn't been possible because whilst we've created a great deal of additional places, this new place has been occupied with new demand coming into the system. And then the last pressure has been around cost increase. The overall cost of independent school places has risen by 4% and is projected to continue to rise. And the overall cost of Leicestershire special schools has also increased. So in paragraphs 32 to 34, we've set out some of the national challenges for SEND and also the need for significant change in the system in order for the position to become sustainable. In terms of the Leicestershire financial position, the position has worsened from that set out in the MTFS. And as I've said, it's around that increased demand and cost being the most significant changes in that position. So the cumulative high needs deficit has increased by 13.8 million. And whilst you can see that the financial position in Leicestershire does reflect the national position, it does present a significant financial risk to the local authority. We have set out the current projections in the table in paragraph 35, and you can see that despite the projecting £24 million worth of savings, the high needs budget is anticipated to reach a cumulative deficit of 42 million by 24-25. In terms of the capital programme, it's to date been hugely successful in delivering additional places. The analysis of future demand does indicate that we need to do more. And we've set out the capital programme for the forthcoming MTFS in paragraph 41 as well. And then finally, we are seeking approval to approach the Secretary of State around a transfer of funding. So we're looking to transfer up to 0.5 of funding from the schools block of the dedicated schools grant to the high needs block. We need to do that following consultation with schools, and also it is subject to the approval of the schools forum. Should the schools forum not approve the transfer, or if we want to make a transfer in excess of 0.5%, we can go to the Secretary of State for approval. The financial plan that we've set out does assume a 0.5% transfer for 22-23, and it's estimated to be in the region of 2 million. The intended transfer of funding was set out in a report to the schools forum on the 8th of February, and we will need to seek agreement from the Secretary of State both for transfer but also for disapplication, as we've set out in paragraph 44. Should the schools forum not approve the transfer, we will be required to submit to the Secretary of State in November prior to the submission of the schools funding formula to DfE. If the transfer doesn't take place, then the forecast deficit will increase to 43 million by 24-25. So to conclude, the SEND system in its current format isn't sustainable and presents a significant risk to the local authority and clearly needs to undergo a number of major changes. It is hoped, but not expected, that the long-awaited SEND review will hopefully deliver some of this change. And obviously there are some concerns around the further delay to the publication of this that may well worsen the financial position both locally and nationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Deborah?
Thank you, Leader. I just want to pick up on the schools block transfer, the 0.5% from that block to the high needs block. We're not the only council to be facing this difficult decision, and I do understand why school leaders would not be happy with this proposal. It also goes against my own thoughts that taking money away from schools gives them less scope to be inclusive, and therefore they will push back to the local authority. We need to show the government that we've done all we can to get the overspend under control. Working within a demand-led budget, especially when we're caring for vulnerable children, will always be difficult. I stand 100% behind the director that if a child needs specialist provisions, we will provide for that child. We asked last year, but the Schools Forum didn't agree to the transfer. We did advise them at that point that if the overspend continued, we have no option but to request the transfer this year. It's with a very heavy heart that we have to do this. We know that transferring funds will affect schools and affect their ability to be more inclusive. But until our high needs block is funded accordingly to the need in Leicestershire, we have no option to take this transfer forward. We continue to work hard to look at alternatives to resourcing according to our needs, and we will continue to be forward thinking. We will get this under control, and I will continue to lobby ministers so they're aware of the issues we face and what needs to happen to enable councils with responsibility for safeguarding and caring for children to be fully resourced to do that. From paragraph 25 onwards, you can see the work that's ongoing within the department to ensure that all children within Leicestershire are supported and cared for. We also need to look at the EHCP process to ensure that they are robust, are needed and meets the needs of the child. We're also considering the further capital investment under an exempt item later on today that will also support our high needs development plan and ensure more children are able to be placed in their own county, near to their families and communities, and not to be sent to placements out of county. We also have very large housing growth planned across Leicestershire, which will see the population rise and the demand for children's services increase further. I move the recommendations on the Green Order paper.
Thank you, Deborah. Lee?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Happy to second. I mean, I'll just reiterate what's been said by Jane and by Deborah, really. I mean, the resource implications of a £43 million deficit, despite the delivery of £24 million in revenue savings. Projected deficit is the most significant short-term financial risk faced by this county council. Under time-limited legislation, local authorities are required to carry deficits on their balance sheet as unusable reserves. However, given the deficit will ultimately need to be recognised and financed, there's a real and immediate impact of the financial resilience of the authority and the funding available for all other county council services. So, happy to second.
Thank you. No other speakers. All in favour, please show. Thank you very much. We now go to agenda item 6. Oh, this item is withdrawn from the agenda. The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government have helpfully offered to work with the County Council to see if we can find a way where the HIF grant can be accepted, and I'm pleased to take up their offer. This will be one last push, so this is deferred or withdrawn. Agenda item 7, National Bus Strategy. Item 7 provides an overview of the recently published National Bus Strategy and the Bus Service Improvement Plan guidance and seeks Cabinet's approval of the County Council's intended approach to improving bus services in Leicestershire. Anne Carruthers, Director of Environment and Transport, will present the report. Then I'll be going over to Ozzy, who has responsibility. So you first, Anne.
Thank you, Leader. Good afternoon. Government published their National Bus Strategy, Bus Back Better, March this year, along with supporting guidance in May. It does really mark a step change in government signalling that it wants to see substantial improvements to bus services across England. Under this, local transport authorities are required to decide on one of two options to implement. The first one is an enhanced partnership scheme, and that's a formal agreement between the local transport authority and the local bus operators to work together to improve services. The second option is bus franchising, the model that you're probably aware of in London. And that's where the local transport authority specifies the local bus services to be provided, determines the routes, the timetables, the fares, and then contracts with the market to actually provide those services. Government is clear that by not opting for one of these paths, that local authorities will not be able to access substantial funding and the VIA-MATCHA £3 billion pot for funding bus improvements, and that current COVID bus services support grant will also cease for authorities not complying with the provisions set out in the bus strategy. We've assessed the options put forward, and the report recommends the enhanced partnership route for Leicestershire on the basis that this option provides the ability to work with the operators to make improvements, but it's balanced with proportionate cost in delivering that and a proportionate level of risk to the authority. The bus franchising route would give a greater control to the County Council as Transport Authority. However, it would cost significantly more to resource and lead to much greater levels of risk sitting with the Council in terms of those bus service provision. If the Cabinet agrees the proposed enhanced partnership route, the next step would be for the Director of Law and Governance to publish a statutory notice, and that's required under provisions of the bus strategy by the end of this month. Following that, we have until October to work up our bus service improvement plan. That's fundamentally the actions we would seek to take, and actually have the formal enhanced partnership scheme operational with the bus operators by March next year. In terms of resource, Department for Transport have allocated every local transport authority £100,000 this financial year in recognition of the lack of capacity available to carry out this work. Publishing a statutory notice regarding the enhanced partnership scheme means that we can then access a further £25 million pot of funding for resourcing the work needed in delivery. There are no details currently about how we'd access the larger £3 billion pot that was referred to that would be needed to help deliver improvements to implement the actions under the enhanced partnership. The report therefore asks for approval to pursue the enhanced partnership route and the associated actions set out in the recommendations in the order paper. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Anne. Ozzy?
Thank you, Leader. I fully support moving forward with the enhanced partnership scheme. The government's national bus strategy aims to bring about fundamental changes to the way in which the bus services are delivered, and we'll be at the forefront of this in Leicestershire. We'll benefit from continued access to significant government funding. This is about picking up the gauntlet to reverse the recent shift away from using public transport. That's a result of the pandemic, and encourages passengers back on to take those seats. We want to deliver benefits such as simpler fares, contactless payments, more services at the right times, and ticketing so people can easily move between bus and train, for example. Providing this frequent high quality service also reduces environmental impacts around cars on the road, backs up all that we are doing to decarbonise transport, such as electric park and ride buses, which I've personally travelled on. We've also launched a questionnaire that we want to hear from people across Leicestershire how to improve the local bus services, and we encourage them to take part and give us their feedback. We'll produce a report based on the findings, and we are coming back to council later this year. So I fully support this, Leader.
Thank you, Ozzy. I think it's good. I've got Louise. Louise.
Yes, fully support this and happy to second. Thank you.
Anything further to add, Ozzy, or should we move to the vote? Okay. Okay, all in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Agenda item 8, Members Highway Fund Proposals, pages 101 to 106. It seeks Cabinet's approval for the creation of a Members Fund that will provide each county councillor with a budget to spend on highway and environmental improvements in their own division. And again, we'll present the report, and then I'll be calling Ozzy again. Anne?
Thank you, Leader. As you've said, the report seeks approval to set up a Members Highway Fund. This would provide every county councillor with £25,000 to spend in their area on minor highway and environmental improvements in this financial year. The initiative recognises the importance of small-scale highway works to communities, and these are often measures that we as a highway authority can struggle to provide under current levels of government funding. £5 million has been identified within the County Council's medium-term financial strategy for highways works, and of that amount, 1.4 million would be earmarked for this particular initiative, the Members Highway Fund, to cover the measures that would be implemented under that, as well as the additional officer resource that would be needed to deliver the scheme. The principles about how the fund would operate are set out in paragraphs 14 to 20 of the report and has been based on our experience of the Highway Community Fund, which operated last year in the pandemic and offered support to communities in providing highway-related social distancing measures. That was funded by the County Council. So really our learning from that has gone into how we'd formulate this proposed highway fund. Example of the type of initiatives that could be funded are set out in paragraph 21 of the report. If Cabinet approves the scheme, we would seek to brief councillors in July so they can begin to consider the measures they would want for their areas and liaise with officers to work up the details for their implementation later this financial year. The intention would be to continue the scheme into the following financial year, 22-23, but that is subject to funding being identified within the refreshed medium-term financial strategy. The recommendations are set out in the order paper.
Thank you. Ozzy?
Thank you, Leader. And Anne has explained exactly what we're proposing to do. And I'm proud that this administration is delivering on its election pledges to improve our community's highway concerns. You will see from the report that members are being offered £25,000 for their local area to improve on the basic things that they need to do in their area that residents complain about regularly, such as cutting hedges, filling potholes and filling pavements that are uneven. These are the things that residents regularly can complain about, and this administration is making sure that we give the tools to our members to actually bring these forward. I support this motion.
Thank you very much, Ozzy. Lee?
Yeah, it was a manifesto pledge by this party. Doorstep issues were raised, and I think this does allow all members to deliver in their own division. So it'll be good to see as the scheme develops and members share their good practice, so other members can take on board what's working and what possibly isn't working. But happy to second, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Deborah?
Thank you. I really welcome this scheme as well. And I think we're all aware in our particular areas of those little jobs that need doing that we can't get done. I think we need to manage expectations of probably parish councils and residents about how much some of this stuff actually costs, because I don't think they actually realise the price of it. And I really urge all members to attend the briefing in July, because this is a very new area for us to be involved in. 25,000 is not a small amount of money for us to manage. So I think we need to ensure the support's there for members and for residents and parish councils.
Very good point. I mean, I've already had 5 parish councils contact me wanting the 25,000. So managing expectations may well be a challenge. Right. All in favour, please show. It was moved by Ozzy, seconded by Lee. Thank you. Excellent. 9, procurement of community life choices. This is services. This is on 107 to 120. John Wilson, Director of Adults and Communities, will present the report, and then I'll be going to Christine, who has responsibility. John, go ahead.
Thank you, Leader. The County Council currently operates a commissioning framework for the provision of day services known as Community Life Choices, or CLC for short. The current framework is due to end in September 2020. Was due to end in September 2020, but as providers were concentrating on reshaping services due to the pandemic, the procurement was delayed as a supportive measure. The current contract is now due to end at the end of November this year. The current framework consists of 24 providers supporting over 530 people. And in addition to that, there are a number of non-framework providers who support around 420 people. Alongside the independent sector providers, the council directly operates 10 services across the county, which supports 112 people. The pandemic has had a significant impact on CLC services. Virtually all services, including in-house services, were closed during the first lockdown due to the risk of infection. Providers of services have, however, shown a great deal of flexibility and creativity and have continued to provide services and provided a level of individual, virtual and socially distanced services, with increasing numbers of people now returning to services. Throughout the period, the council's worked with providers and with individuals and families and engaged with people to assess the risk that the service disruption has caused. And significant engagement has taken place with those who use services and with providers to prepare for the specification of the new procurement. The key changes proposed for the new framework are detailed in paragraph 34 of today's report, but they include a move to an open framework, which would expand the opportunities available and allow new providers to tender for services, and to focus on 4 key outcomes: development of skills and confidence for independent living, maximising well-being, supporting carers, and providing a choice as to when and where services are delivered. Over time, the council's share of the CLC market has been steadily reducing, and consideration is now being given as to how best to use the resources available to the council to deliver the best outcomes for service users. To that end, the council is proposing that its in-house services focus on crisis care, short-term care, reablement and enablement, and support for carers through the delivery of a responsive 7-day-a-week service, but ceasing the provision of long-term maintenance support. The pandemic and the upcoming procurement have expedited the need to test whether there's capacity in the external market to meet the needs of people who are currently using in-house services. So it's therefore proposed that a consultation exercise is undertaken from August to October with those who currently use in-house services for the potential for them to move to the independent sector following implementation of the new framework. This would include conducting reviews of everybody who uses in-house services and consulting on reducing in-house provision by transitioning people to appropriate independent sector services. So subject to Cabinet approval, a transitional period would be provided to ensure the least disruption for people who use in-house services, with a view to transferring services in 2022. The Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee considered these proposals at its last meeting, and the committee's comments are included in today's report at paragraphs 46 to 47. Thank you, Leader.
Excellent, John. Christine, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I support what John's just said, that we're going to go out and get people's views that have been using it, and that we're looking now at doing different aspects of it rather than going out and doing a wider support. We're going out and asking people for their opinions. So we're going to take that on board and then come back. Thank you.
Seems good to me, Christine. Pam?
Yeah, I fully support this. It's very important for people in these situations to have their health and well-being very well looked after. And I think this aims to do that. So I'm quite happy to second the report.
Thank you.
I think I need to move the recommendations on the green paper.
I thought you did. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Agenda item 10 is the annual report of the commercial strategy, pages 121 to 140. The report updates Cabinet on the performance of the County Council's commercial strategy and provides details of the intended future plans to further develop the Council's commercial approach. Please note the Scrutiny Commission considered a report on the strategy at its meeting on the 7th of June, and a minute extract is attached to the order paper marked 10. Chris Tambini, Director of Corporate Resources, will take us through the report. Then I'll be going to Lee, who has responsibility. Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The pandemic has severely impacted commercial services, and I suppose there's no surprise given the services provided include things like school meals, outdoor and residential education, county hall catering, and all of these suffered major disruption and some of them temporary closure. Financially, again, no surprise that we missed the income target. However, it is pleasing that we did overall break even. And the reason why we broke even is a combination of both government support, including schemes such as furlough, but also good cost control and a real focus on the bottom line. I think it's worth noting that staff within traded services have helped out with some of the new services that were established last year, a whole range of new services such as free school meals, holiday vouchers, food parcels, grants, etc. And all staff have had to adapt to new and rapidly changing sort of circumstances. And I think a particular thank you must go out to school food service who've had a particularly kind of difficult year. In terms of the forward look, this year again started in challenging circumstances. The early spring, there was difficult trading conditions. It is pleasing that business generally across the board is starting to pick up, and some of the kind of more notable service enhancements, such as the opening of the new cafe at Stimson Colliery Park, again, it proved successful. We do overall expect that this will be a year of transition, and it'll take probably another year before we get to previous kind of income levels. That's all I was going to say by way of introduction, and the recommendations on the oil paper.
Thanks, Chris. Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. Chris touched on it. Trading conditions over the last year have been unprecedented. Staff have, however, been excellent in managing and mitigating the impacts of COVID-19 so far as this was possible. Services were reshaped to reduce costs and to make them more resilient to respond to changing circumstances. This and the prudent use of government schemes such as the furlough scheme helped to ensure an almost cost-neutral position for 2021. The council sought to redeploy staff where possible. Some were redeployed to support work critical to the fight against COVID, such as test and trace activities. The work done to keep our schools open and children fed despite lockdowns and restrictions has been impressive and is very worthy of note. The service also operated the COVID Winter Grants Scheme with over 47,000 grants having been issued to people in need of support this winter. The next year, 21-22, will be a recovery year. We know that, and some improvements were already being seen, although there are still challenges ahead as some of the restrictions remain in place. Some of our services continue to be impacted, and this is likely to continue into the summer. It is unlikely we will hit our targets this year, but we'll continue to mitigate the impacts and evolve and change with a view towards future trading years. So happy to propose the recommendations on page 121 of the agenda pack.
Thank you very much, Lee. Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to second the motion as on the order paper.
Thank you, Peter. Now the speakers, show of hands, please. Thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item 11, Annual Treasury Management Report 2021. These are on pages 141 to 156. It's report of the Treasury Management activity for the year, as I mentioned. Corporate Governance Committee also looked at this at its meeting earlier in the month and noted the activities and performance. I think we're going to have, oh, there he is, young Declan, the Assistant Director for Strategic Finance, who will present the report. Then I'll be coming back to you again, Lee. Declan, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Leader. So, as mentioned, the report just summarises the actions taken and the performance achieved in respect to Treasury management activities in the last financial year, 2021, and this reporting is just in line with the SIPFA requirements. The global pandemic did mean that we started the year with a sort of a degree of turmoil in financial markets. And based upon fears that credit ratings would fall for our usual counterparties, we did take action to reduce both the duration of loans and who we would lend to, just to help manage some of that risk. And the opportunity cost of doing this was relatively low due to the fall in base rates. But fortunately, these measures were only required temporarily due to swift action from central banks and actually the better resilience at financial institutions that had been implemented following the credit crunch. Unfortunately, the downside of the central bank interventions was that although credit ratings were improved, all the extra liquidity reduced into the markets made it difficult to lend to financial institutions at a reasonable rate, although it is worth noting that we did manage to avoid the negative interest rates that were being kind of were to be found at the time. So although sort of the potential issues, we did finish the year off with all the loans repaid in full and on time. In terms of the lending itself, all lending was taken in line with the policy, although there was one reportable change in circumstances during the period. So whilst a loan was taken out, Lloyds Bank did face a ratings downgrade for a loan that is actually still outstanding, but it is still viewed that it's very, very low risk that a default will occur, and Lloyds actually are an acceptable counterparty. It's just for a shorter duration than what the original loan was sort of granted for. In terms of the debt side of things, no new debt was taken on during the year, and there was no new opportunities to repay debt due to the prohibitive penalties that are still in place. And we continue to make our statutory provision for debt repayment through the sort of the minimum revenue provision, or the MRP as it's known. In the short term, this is creating this sort of what's termed an over borrowed provision, and it does mean that we've got some funding available, and we expect to use this temporarily to fund the capital programme in the MTFS, allowing us to avoid any external debt. The loan portfolio that we make primarily to sort of banks did make a return in the year of 0.4%, which is pretty sort of poor, but it does reflect the base rates dropping to 0.1%. And the performance of the loan portfolio is obviously better than sort of short-term investing, but for the first time in quite a while, it has been slightly below our peers due to the temporary temporary measures that I mentioned we took at the start of the pandemic. And we do expect these depressed returns to continue for the current financial year. The recommendation is simply just to note the report. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Declan. Lee, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As lead member, I'm very satisfied the approach taken to Treasury management is appropriate. Deliberate focus on caution over financial return that complements the CAFE strategy works very well. I think the year that we're covering spans the worst impact on the COVID pandemic on the financial markets, but it's pleasing to report that we have few issues beyond the inevitable decline in interest receivable that Declan's just mentioned. The pressure that this council is under to fund capital investment is well documented. It's pleasing to note that the council's strong balance sheet and the work done over previous years is playing its part here. By avoiding external borrowing, the investment is made markedly cheaper. Happy to make the recommendation that the report be noted, Chair.
Thank you, Lee. Richard?
Yes, happy to second that, Chairman.
The speakers, show of hands in favour, please. Thank you. Sorry, National Youth Agency, transfer of pension fund assets and liabilities, page 157 to 164. Back to you, Declan.
Thank you, Leader. Just by way of a bit of background, National Youth Agency are a local charity that acts as a national body for youth work across the whole of England. They are a relatively small organisation with income of just £3.3 million and 26 employees in the last sort of calendar year. Membership of sort of the pension funds is obviously a very significant commitment for a charity this size, and the liabilities that they do hold are estimated to be £18.5 million. So it is fair to say that the National Youth Agency and other small charities who did join local government pension schemes across the country did so at a time when the full extent of employer risks weren't fully understood. The progress to date so far is that the National Youth Agency have eliminated the deficit of that the liabilities of that £18.5 million are covered when you take into account future investment returns on the assets that they do hold. However, on the more prudential accounting basis that is displayed in their accounts, a deficit is always likely to be shown. In fact, in 2020, despite this closing of the deficit on the future investment return basis, they did still show a £4.1 million balance sheet liability, which did result in an overall net liability for the organisation. The National Youth Agency don't have a guarantor for the pension scheme, which does expose the pension fund to the risk of future default, which is obviously a financial and a reputational risk. The proposal is for the assets and liabilities of the Youth Agency to transfer across to the county councils within the existing Leicestershire Pension Fund, thus ending National Youth Agency's involvement and leaving the county council with the eventual risk or reward of sort of how those assets and liabilities ultimately do balance out. There's no actual cost to the county council at this point. It's just a transfer within the pension fund itself. There are reputational benefits to the county council as an administrator of the fund by avoiding a charity getting into financial trouble through the sort of the high sort of level of sort of exposure relative to their size that they're taking on. And the financial risk being taken on would feel reasonable due to the county council's ability to take a very long-term view in terms of the impact of sort of investment volatility, which obviously does even out over a period of time. And the risk proposed to be taken on by the county councils are lower than compared to a standard pension scheme, as there are no longer any active members. And the key risks remaining are the investment returns, life expectancy, inflation and legislation. And taking each of these risks in turn, the target investment returns have been assessed independently over the long period. And by long period, I mean sort of 20 plus years. And they're viewed to have an 80% plus chance of meeting or exceeding the targeted return. And it's this long-term view that the county council can take is a key reason the proposal works for both parties. Life expectancy is obviously very difficult to manage. It's going to be what it will be, but recent improvements in the forecast do make further significant increases unlikely. Inflation is a key risk because it directly impacts the benefits of pension fund members, and as such, the investment strategy is set with a view to managing this risk. And the final risk of legislation is another difficult to manage one, but historically changes have not focused on improving benefits already earned, and a change in government approach does seem unlikely, making this a relatively low risk. So in conclusion, although proposal is for the County Council to take on additional financial risks, that there are benefits to a local charity, reputational benefits, and actually the potential of financial gain in the long term. The recommendation is per the order paper.
Seems good to me. Lee, what do you think?
Thank you, Chairman. Understanding of financial risk of pensions has changed significantly over recent years, and it is right that this risk is actively managed to the benefit of all of the pension fund employers. It is pleasing that the County Council is able to support a local charity, particularly one that provides such vital support to youth workers nationally. The previous Treasury Management paper showed the benefits of taking a long-term view to financial management, and this is another good example of the benefits of the Council's approach. Whilst not without a degree of risk to the County Council, it is a reasonable approach to take, and it should benefit both the National Youth Agency and also the Council, and reputational as well. So happy to move the proposed motion on page 157 of the agenda pack. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lee. Richard?
Yes, I'll second that, Chairman.
No other speakers. Show of hands in favour, please. Thank you very much. 13, Leicester and Leicestershire Economic Growth Strategy, pages 165 to 168, and is a supplementary pack, pages 3 to 8. This report advises the Cabinet of the development of a draft economic growth strategy prepared by the Leicester and Leicestershire Enterprise Partnership ahead of a formal stakeholder consultation beginning on the 28th of June. Simon Lawrence, Head of Growth Service, will talk us through the report, and then Peter Bedford will speak first. Simon.
Good afternoon, Leader. Thank you. So as you've said, the purpose of this report is to advise the Cabinet on the latest stage of the development of the economic growth strategy for Leicester and Leicestershire, which is being led by the LEP. Work on the growth strategy started earlier in the year in response to the significant impact the pandemic has had on businesses and individuals in the city and the county. The need for the strategy also reflects the fact that there is no single strategy for the sub-region in place that sets out sector priorities or a vision for the economy. This strategy will resolve that. LEP board members, including the leader of the County Council and lead members, have attended a series of workshops during which the structure, focus and content of the strategy has been discussed, and a first draft was shared amongst board members on the 7th of June. At paragraph 23 of the report, Leader, a series of observations of this draft are set out, many of which were discussed by the LEP board workshop on the 10th of June. Whilst the observations complement elements of the draft strategy, it also suggests that the document needs to be clearer in its purpose, more accurately reflective of specific opportunities and challenges in Leicester and Leicestershire, and particularly rural issues, clear in terms of women investment opportunities, clear about the role of town centres in supporting economic growth, and also that it needs to be explicit in its response to the County Council's climate emergency declaration. It is recommended that the Cabinet notes these observations and that these be considered by the LEP in the development of a further draft ahead of the formal consultation of the strategy due to run, as you mentioned, between the 28th of June and the 6th of August. The Cabinet will be asked to give consideration to the formal consultation draft at its meeting in July. The recommendations are as set out on the order paper. Thank you, Leader.
Peter.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to thank Simon and officers for briefing me on this role that I took on in the last few weeks as the County Council's rep on the LEP. I've attended the workshop, as Simon said, and fed into the initial feedback on the proposals. Some of the points I'd perhaps like to bring out are articulated in the supplementary paper. A number of those include, making the rural economy, making the emphasis on the rural economy clearer and more precise, making it clearer in terms of inward investment opportunities for the county, clearer in terms of the role and responsibilities for our town centres in supporting economic growth. And also, I believe the strategy needs to be more explicit in this County Council's commitment to climate change and the climate emergency. All of those points, I think, should be built into any revised strategy. I won't go on too much because this is coming back to Cabinet in July, but I recommend the motion as on the order paper.
Very good points there, Peter. And when you're at the LEP, continue to make them. And don't forget, there's no mention of HS2 in this document whatsoever. And of course, where I live, and the blooming thing races through, so it will have an impact. So they ought to mention it at least in passing. So having said that, I'm happy to second that you keep battling on with them, Peter. No other speakers. Show of hands in favour of them. Thank you very much. 14, East Midlands Global Gateway, Freeport, including urgent action taken. This is on 169 to 176. It updates Cabinet on the latest position in establishing a Freeport covering sites in Leicestershire, Nottingham and Derbyshire. Tom Pinnell, Assistant Director, will talk to the report, and then it's me. Tom.
Yes, thank you, Leader. As you say, the report provides an update on the latest position and also sets out next steps in the Freeport approval process. And it also advises of urgent actions taken to progress the Freeport proposal by the Chief Executive under his delegated powers. Freeports form part of the government's economic recovery and levelling up agendas. The measures associated with Freeports are set out in paragraph 14 of the report, and that includes customs and tax measures, with the benefits which Freeports can bring to a local economy being set out in paragraph 16. In his budget in March, the Chancellor announced that a proposed Freeport covering sites in Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire could proceed to the next stage, and that followed the submission of an expression of interest earlier in the year. And prior to that, in December of last year, the Cabinet had authorised the Chief Executive to support the submission of an expression of interest. So you were updated on the current state of play at that time. Following the budget statement, the government issued guidance, and that sets out the next stages, which essentially comprises the submission of robust outline and full business cases later this year. Paragraph 20 sets out the timeline for that process in a bit more detail. And also after the Chancellor's budget, the government also provided detailed feedback on the submitted expression of interest, and this will be taken into account in drafting the business cases. The Freeport will be known as the East Midlands Global Gateway, and the three sites covered by it include land at and near East Midlands Airport in Leicestershire, and that will be the airport part of that will be the primary customs site of the Freeport. The other two sites at Ratcliffe-on-Soar Power Station in Nottinghamshire and the East Midlands Intermodal Park in Derbyshire, which is close to the Toyota factory. The government guidance also requires that a single local authority needs to act as the accountable body for the Freeport, and it was agreed that the County Council would be best placed to take on this role, particularly given that the primary customs site at the airport is located in the county. And the Chief Executive, under his delegated powers, took urgent action to agree that the County Council would take on this role, and we took on that role on April the 19th. And the accountable body functions are described at paragraph 21. The scale of work needed to develop a strong business case and the testing timeline set out for this have required bringing in additional capacity, as has the need to provide detailed information to government over the past couple of months. So again, under his delegated powers and in consultation with the leader and lead member for resources, the Chief Executive took urgent action to commission EY to provide that additional support and capacity. As accountable body, the Council has been supporting the establishment of an interim Freeport board that had its first meeting last week, and that board includes representatives from the 6 Freeport site landowners, the 3 county councils and the 3 district councils, together with an independent chair. Other work undertaken to establish the board is detailed at paragraph 23, and that includes the appointment of a Freeport programme manager, and the recruitment for that is underway. And finally, the government is providing capacity funding to support Freeport work, and the council has coordinated a recent bid to that fund, so we expect feedback on that soon. Recommendations are as on the order paper.
Thank you. Well, it falls to me to move the recommendations, and can I reassure members that the Chief Executive did keep me fully informed, and C, when we took on the assumed the role of lead local authority, I was also consulted on the appointment of Ernst & Young, both of which I supported. The next stage, obviously, is the outline robust and strong business case, which obviously, if they don't get it right, they won't be one of the free ports. So we wait to see how they get on with that. And also to place it on the record that I intend to work closely, obviously, with North West Leicestershire, who are the borough authority, district authority, sorry, for the airport. And we work well together. So having said that, I'll move the recommendations, and I think it's you, Deborah.
Thank you, Leader. Very happy to second this item. I think the Freeport will be an excellent addition to the East Midlands and play an important part in the East Midlands economic recovery following the pandemic. I'm pleased that the County Council will be leading on the project, and I look forward to further updates coming back to Cabinet as the sites develop.
Indeed. Moved by me, seconded by Deborah. All in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on. Some more urgent actions. Urgent actions taken by the Chief in relation to Leicester and Leicestershire Statement of Common Ground relating to housing and employment land needs, March 2021, pages 177 to 216. Okay. Tom, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Leader. The report advises on urgent action taken by the Chief Executive, and that's in relation to the signatory of to becoming a signatory to the Statement of Common Ground, which has been specifically prepared to accompany the Charnwood local plan ahead of its public examination stage. The statement is attached to the report. The statement is in effect a planning document which sets out how the local authorities across Leicester and Leicestershire are collaborating on cross-boundary strategic planning issues in the context of the government's duty to cooperate. The statement in front of you is in effect an interim statement prepared to accompany the Charnwood local plan, and it's ahead of a fuller, more comprehensive statement which is in preparation, but which won't be ready in time for the Charnwood local plan examination. That fuller statement, expected to be finalised next winter, will take account of significant recent changes announced by the government to how housing need is calculated, and that includes applying an uplift to the housing need figure in some cities, including Leicester. That fuller statement will apportion any housing need arising in Leicester but which can't be met within the city across the county, and it will be prepared by the 9 local authorities working together and will be approved individually by each of them. So we'll come back to this Cabinet in due course. The statement in front of you is an interim statement, and it doesn't go as far as apportioning any housing need across the county, because the work, the evidence needs to be collated and work done to do that. So this is an interim statement which is in effect a factual description of current housing need and supply, and it describes the process by which the local authorities in Leicester and Leicestershire will agree the future distribution of housing. The purpose of that is to provide reassurance to the inspector and others involved in the public examination of the Charnwood local plan that the duty to cooperate is being fulfilled and that the local authorities are collaborating on those key cross-boundary decisions. The recommendations are as on the order paper.
Sure, I'm happy to move the recommendations. Tom, you mentioned 2 key phrases in there: duty to cooperate and will agree. If and I hear from some that they may not agree, what happens if they don't agree?
Well, I think if there isn't agreement to the document by local authorities, then that would put Charnwood in relation to their local plan in some difficulty, in the sense that it wouldn't be possible to demonstrate that the local authorities are collaborating on housing distribution across the wider area. The risk there is that that a local plan wouldn't get approved, and developers would have would be unconstrained in building across the county, in effect.
To be fair, Tom, just so we don't get misinterpreted, I wasn't particularly fingering Charnwood that they wouldn't agree. I just heard as county leader that some district councils may not agree to take the city's numbers under the duty to cooperate. I was just wondering what would happen if they didn't agree without mentioning any borough in particular. So the answer is still the same, I presume, Tom?
Yes, that's right. And I wasn't intending my answer to apply specifically to Charnwood.
Thank you very much, Tom. So I'll move it, and I think Peter Bedford is next.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, happy to second the motion on your paper.
Christine Radford, switching your phone off, are you?
I think
speaking.
I am sorry. It got switched back on. It got switched back on in the cabinet room. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think I ought to just mention that I'm a member of Charnwood Borough Council, and as it was mentioned during Tom's speech, I just think I ought to just declare a non.
Yes, noted, Christine. I didn't mention Charnwood. I just heard one of the districts, but now it's been mentioned. We will note that you're a member of Charnwood, and I'm a member of North West, and you're a member of Charnwood. You a member of Hinckley, Peter? Very wise. Okay, then. So it was moved by me and seconded by Peter. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Moving on, 16, exception to contract procedure rules, more urgent action from the Chief in relating to the appointment of a supplier to provide short-term hire vehicles. This is on 217 to 220, and it's Anne going to speak to it. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you. Yes, this reports to inform Cabinet of urgent action taken by the Chief Executive in agreeing an exception to the Council's contract procurement rules to award a contract for short-term hire vehicles to Enterprise Flexi Rent. This award is for a period up to 31st of March 2022, and it will allow time to put in place a longer-term contractual arrangement. The pandemic significantly increased the Council's need for short-term hire vehicles. Social distancing meant we could no longer operate with more than one employee in a cab of a vehicle, and this mainly affected our highway service, meaning that the spend levels under the existing contract exceeded permitted thresholds. The provision with Enterprise Flexi Rent allowed for master vendor arrangements rather than procuring from a number of different suppliers, and it offered us a 5% saving on previous arrangements. The contract was put in place under the ESPO framework in March 2020. However, since that time, review of this arrangement as a result of new systems highlighted that a contract exception was needed, hence this exception report coming to Cabinet at the current time. Work is currently ongoing in procuring the longer term arrangement that I mentioned prior to the expiry of this contract in March next year, and the Cabinet is asked to note the report. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy with it. It has been obviously a difficult time, what with COVID and elections, so that's probably why we've got more urgent actions. I'll move it. Lee?
Yeah, happy to second it, Chair.
All in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Agenda item 17 is items referred from over in scrutiny. There are none. 18, any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent. We have none. 19 is exclusion of the press and public, and I better formally read it. I now move that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded for the following items of business on the of the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3, 5 and 10 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that in all circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I'll move it. And Deborah?
I'll second the motion.
Can we have a formal vote, please? That is approved. So thank you. We now have to wait for people to leave and for the streaming to be stopped. And young Matt down